do you think I am? Some kind of puppet? You pull my string?
You're literally a puppet.
Don't you upset Daddy?
This is science. If we happen...
Mother Gooseberry is one of the most imposing enemies that Reagents will have to tangle with during the events of the game The Outlast Trials. A former host of a Pennsylvania local children's program, Gooseberry would be raised by a single father whose approach to parenting seems to have heavily revolved around abuse and punishment. A devastating childhood of torment that would follow Gooseberry even after his supposed death. The built-up trauma causing her to lash out and impose that abuse on others with the widest brush possible.
I will teach you about dental hygiene! I will teach you about dental hygiene!
The story of Mother Gooseberry as we know it begins with a man named Dr. A. Futterman and the birth of his daughter, Phyllis. Unfortunately, we don't have many details on what exactly Phyllis and her father's relationship was actually like, but psychological issues that she would later experience point to a troubled past with emotional and perhaps even physical abuse. However, these traumas were locked behind the closed doors of the family's personal lives, as from the public's perception, Futterman was a name that inspired respect. Phyllis's father was a well-accomplished dentist in his local area, gaining notoriety for his family-friendly practice, which was no doubt helped by his daughter's prominent involvement. From a young age, Phyllis would aid Dr. Futterman not only with the tasks of the profession, but also as an emotional support for younger children fearful of the procedures. As she grew up, she would find her calling in these performances, becoming interested in taxidermy to create puppets and musical theater as a means of entertainment. Her charismatic ability to captivate, as well as her father's strong standing in the community, would lead to Phyllis getting a break into local television in 1951 with a show called The Mother Gooseberry Hour. The show would find its footing with these same children she'd been entertaining in the dentist chair and would become quite a hit around the greater Philadelphia area. However, while on the surface, Phyllis Futterman's life seemed to have been coming together perfectly, the unexpected death of her father would completely shift that momentum.
When babies are bad, Mother gets disappointed.
And the babies of the Oh, boy, Phyllis, I think I made a mess.
While we can't say for certain what happened to Dr. Futterman, as the police were never able to find his body, his disappearance and likely death would have a profound effect on Phyllis. Without the strong hand of the man who'd raised her, Phyllis's mind would attempt to fill that void with a delusional recreation of her late father. She would imbue this persona onto a puppet, and would, in effect, create two personalities. One being Mother Gooseberry, the playful, comforting mother figure whom she'd embodied on her television program, and the other, Dr. Daddy, a violent, abusive sadist who took pleasure in the pain he could inflict on others. With this rapidly declining mental state, Phyllis's television program would also see a drastic tonal shift. Mother Gooseberry had kept her charismatic charm, but instead of teaching the kids wholesome life lessons about right and wrong, Gooseberry and Dr. Futterman would begin to lead her audience down much less savory paths. Using a classical application of abuse and praise, she would begin to train them to act out in immoral and often illegal ways, even going so far as to sell them narcotics packaged as toothache drops, boxes donning the face of her beloved father. Of course, such degenerate behavior would attract the attention of the local police, and in 1955, they would plan a raid on her television studio on charges of kidnapping and racketeering. With nowhere to run, Phyllis would hold up in the puppetry tunnels beneath her set, making her last stand with a power drill where she would kill 2 officers and wound 5 before finally being apprehended. With such a vicious and violent rap sheet, Phyllis Futterman would be sentenced to life at Holmesburg Prison, north of Philadelphia, her incarceration only proving to further damage her already very fragile mind. The staff at Holmesburg was infamous for testing commercial products on their inmates, and Phyllis was no exception. Experiments performed by a man named Dr. Kligman would expose the former actress to carbonic acid, dioxin, and skin grafts of cadaver flesh. Terrifying procedures that were considered fairly mild in comparison to some of her prisoner peers. These experiments would leave Phyllis horribly disfigured, but despite her outward appearance, she would remain as strong and as charismatic as ever. Her face now matching the rage-fueled monster she'd become. The story of Mother Gooseberry and her descent into madness would attract the ear of a man named Clyde Perry, who worked in the collections department for the Murkoff Corporation. At the time, Perry had been given the task to find as many Hitlers as possible by the head of Murkoff's Signala facility, Dr. Hendrik Joliet Easterman. Easterman had been attempting to create a program for churning out brainwashed agents, and hypothesized that a charismatic leader may be the key to this endeavor. To that end, Perry would hear the tale of Phyllis Futterman, who sounded like the perfect candidate. Not only had she created a cult-like child audience back during her tenure as a television personality, but even at Holmesburg, she'd managed to cultivate a following amongst her fellow inmates and the facility's staff. With the hopes of finding what Easterman was looking for, Perry would travel to the prison to have a meeting with this infamous woman. A meeting which would ultimately seal her fate as ideal for Project Lathe. Mother Gooseberry is one of the most terrifying ex-pops that you'll have to face in the bloodied halls of the Signala facility. A woman who's had such a shady yet storied life, filled with showmanship and depravity. An angry father, a burgeoning television show, a murderous rampage, a traumatic prison stint, all leading to her new home as a whimsical devil in environments custom-made for her derangement. Gooseberries is a story of a pressure valve pushed to its break. A child so enamored with her father that she can't live without his harassment. And while she may have finally found a home that's perfect for Mother Gooseberry and Dr. Daddy, if any part of the Phyllis Futterman who used to attempt to brighten the days of frightened children all those years ago still exists, she's likely living in a hell that only gets more sickening by the day.
Dr. F-U-double-T! Mother's friend?